as the hearse now slowly leaves Georgia Southwestern State University after the 2 wreaths were placed there in front of the bronze statue of Mrs. Carter. What you're seeing is vehicles carrying loved ones. The Carters have 11 grandchildren, 14 great-grandchildren, of course, 4 children. Their daughter, Amy Carter, was in the White House with them as a young girl, a 9-year-old, when she went with her parents to the White House.
Yes.
And we see that long line of loved ones following along. Of course, you can't see this line without thinking about former President Jimmy Carter, who was with his wife until the final moment. His grandson was talking about the fact that when Mrs. Carter entered hospice and she declined quite quickly, that the former president asked that his bed be moved right towards the end of her bed so they could be right next to each other, and that he held her hand until the very end. And when she took her final breath, he asked everyone in the room just to clear the room for a moment, that he just needed a few moments alone with his wife. And you think about a lifetime connection that really started, in a hospital room when Jimmy Carter was 3 and she was a newborn, and how their lives intersected. She saw a picture of Jimmy Carter on her friend Ruth's wall as a teenager and said, "That's a handsome young man." And Ruth, his sister, helped set them up. And wow, what a incredible life together and impact together. And I think when we see the crowds lining the fence there, just wanting to take this moment to say thank you and pay their respects, you feel maybe the depth of the impact one life can make.
And there's not too many people in planes, but a lot of people have traveled near and far to be here just to get a glimpse of the motorcade passing by, just to be a part of this moment of history, because she really did impact so many lives. And we can see the police escort starting to come now. The motorcycles coming down.
So the next stop for this motorcade will be coming towards Atlanta. They'll take I-75 into Atlanta, and I think with great significance take the John Lewis Freedom Parkway as they then will go to the Carter Center. And I think you'll see a lot of people lining the streets and highways between there and here, and a lot of people in the next 3 days of ceremonies honoring her life, to take a moment like the crowds you see there along the street there at Georgia Southwestern State University there in Americus, to take a moment to be part of this next part of history, really.
Next era. And it's really telling, it's interesting to see who will, I guess, take the baton that Mrs. Carter has put out there. She devoted her life to service. She was a first lady. She was a wife of a president. She was a wife of a governor. But she was working. She was his partner. Actually, I have a quote from Mrs. Carter here, or Mr. Carter rather, here, saying, "Rosalynn was my equal partner in everything I ever accomplished. She gave me wise guidance and encouragement when I needed it. As long as Rosalynn was in the world, I always knew someone loved and supported me." And what I love about their love story, every single night they read the Bible together, they prayed, he taught Sunday school, and he was just so in love with Rosalynn.
Sometimes they do that in Spanish because they said they wanted to make sure that they kept up on their Spanish as well. And there's a funny story there. Former President Carter once said that their anniversary kind of came up on and surprised him, and he woke up in the morning and said, "Oh, it's our anniversary." So he said, "I wrote a very nice handwritten card and said, anything you'd like as a gift, honey." And she said, "Just bring me a cup of coffee and a kiss every morning." And he did that from that point on, which was in the late 80s until they could no longer do that anymore.
Oh my goodness.
So you see there Georgia State President Neil Weaver and Rosalynn Carter Institute for Caregivers CEO Jennifer Olson walking back towards the wreaths that they placed there at the bronze statue of Mrs. Carter. Again, this is on the Georgia Southwestern State University campus. Christy Diaz is there and has been covering this for us. I'm curious, Christy, as you are there on the ground, what's the sense and the mood of the people around you?
Surprisingly emotional, especially considering many of the people here have never met the former First Lady, Mrs. Carter, but it was clear as the motorcade came into view and the hearse stopped in front of the building named after her, a reverent silence kind of blanketed the whole area, and people stood. Several of the members of the community that were off to my right behind the barricades were holding and waving American flags, and every member of the press, and there are several cameras here, all surrounded me. Everyone was silent out of respect, especially as Dr. Olson, the President Weaver, the university president, and members of the Carter family walked through and shook each of their hands after the wreaths were laid. Now, I do want to show you, you guys were talking about some of the books, and I think this is an interesting tidbit. Jojo, if you could pan in, zoom in on the statue for me, because this statue, last night when we got here, we walked around and we looked, took a closer look at the statue. It's hard to see from here, but there is a book laying in her lap as part of the statue, and the cover of that book says First Lady from Plains. It is one of the books, one of the many that she wrote, and when you talk about their legacy and history together, she was a very skilled writer, and yes, she and President Carter co-wrote a book together. They talk about it being one of the more contentious moments of their marriage, one of the more difficult times of them working together. They could work on world policy and world peace and disease, but writing a book together seemed to be difficult for them. And to see the First Lady from Plains, that book sitting on her lap as part of that statue, it is emotional to think about the impact that she has made. And another one of the books is about making the most of the rest of your life, which is exactly what they did. There are very few people who can say that their legacy post-presidency shines as brightly as what they did in the White House. Just one more example of the impact that this Carter family has made. But the emotion here on the ground, it's palpable. You can hear as the students still are walking around the campus heading to class. Employees are too. The public still gathered. It is still a reverent quietness here as the motorcade has now moved on and heading toward Atlanta for another couple of days worth of honoring Mrs. Carter's life. But it certainly feels like an honor to be here and witness this moment in person. Cheryl and Faith.